I encourage you to integrate new information as it comes available or as you are thinking about how it applies to your classroom. Think about your next lesson maybe and how you can use that same skill that we're working with. And then open your mind to diverse views as we encourage our students to do the same. And then utilize what you learn. So hopefully by the time we leave here today, you will have a lesson that you can actually start the year off with, engaging students in that discussion where they look at others' viewpoints. So our essential question, how can we engage all students appropriately in rigorous dialogue using collaboration and deep reading strategies? How many of you teach reading as your main subject? And science? Any math? Well, the great thing is, no matter what you're teaching, hopefully you're having dialogue in your classroom, and you want students to collaborate and read, and read. So no matter what they're reading, whether it's a math, history piece, you can still engage in a conversation about that and use some of the reading strategies that we will talk about very shortly that are in your packet. So our objective is to participate with colleagues, and in a couple minutes we're going to shuffle some places, some desks around and people around, and have a practice Socratic Seminar. We're going to talk about the steps needed for Socratic Seminar. We'll model that and do a debrief when we're finished. So talk about your KW for right now. Tell them what you know about Socratic Seminar and what you want to learn. So if you can find an easy shoulder partner. Great, we're going to pair up. Need a pair? Easier? Need a pair? You can make 3. It might be easier to turn. So based on your conversation with your shoulder partner, maybe something came to mind that you remember about Socratic Seminar or that you want to know. Can I get 2 or 3 people to share out something that you discussed in your shoulder discussion? What was yours?
I had Socratic Seminar modeled within my classroom by an avid student, and what she modeled was having 2 texts and having the students go through and take a side and having somewhat of a debate. One person has the floor while the conversation is taking place, and they move around the room according to where they feel their viewpoint is.
Okay, so it sounds like a blend of Socratic Seminar and what we call philosophical chairs. There's a text involved, so that is Socratic Seminar, but because it's more of a debate and sided, then it becomes philosophical chairs, and that's okay. That's a great way. Students take a lot of ownership in this discussion, and you get a chance to sit back after you show them the steps that are needed, and student leaders start to emerge, and they really do enjoy that, leading the conversation of their peers. Did anyone else hear something they'd like to share out? Yes.
All right. Well, I tried it once, not this school year, year before, and one of the things that helped me, because I was familiar with it but never done it, and that a number of my students had already used that strategy in another class. So it helped me that they were familiar with actually how to do it.
Okay.
But I guess my wanting to know, because actually, well, some classes do great, and some classes you have to kind of like drag them along.
Oh, yes.
But one of the things is that, because I only did it that one time, I want to know kind of like how to actually do it so that I could
and become
do
a
it more.
routine. Okay. Can I ask what role did you play, not this year, but last year? What role did you play when the students were having the discussion? Were you a facilitator? And did you monitor the discussion, or did you get a chance to step back and let the students go?
Because I understood this was be student-led. I actually stayed out the way once we set up the room, and I said, but do I need to step in and try to get, but I stayed out.
How hard was that for you as a teacher?
We were talking about that.
Yes, it's very hard sometimes to just shut up. Just to be quiet and let them have the floor and discuss. Did you want to share out?
Yeah. My thing is that a lot of the time, these things kind of evolve in my class because I work with almost exclusively low performers. So if I set up any structure, it's almost like trying to get a bear to go into a trap, and he knows it's a trap. So then I kind of mix it in when they ask questions, then I kind of spring it on them. But, but one of my problems is that, when I explicitly ask questions that challenge kids to think, they just shut down. I get like
Okay.
the cat stare.
No. Well, I have a couple tricks for that, and through the lesson, make sure that I address that. But there's some ways to help students that are reluctant, and there's ways for those students that are overzealous and want to talk and dominate the conversation to get them to quiet down. There's ways to do both of those things so that we can get students, all students, not just one or two very vocal students, to participate in this Socratic Seminar discussion. Okay? So we did a little bit of what we know, what we want to know, and our next part is really just understanding the steps involved. So in your packet, you'll see a page, I think it's numbered, page 3. It is? Okay. These are 6 simple steps. And I say simple, but really they become simple once your students understand what you're asking of them. If you just want to start a discussion and they have no idea about these steps and they're not going to see your vision in the end, they're just going to, walk on faith or just not walk at all sometimes. But definitely selecting text is the key part to a great discussion. Sometimes the text can be too simple or too complex, and we need to really make sure that we're finding a piece of text that's engaging for the level of students that we're working with. We're going to talk about working with L35s to our high-performing students and everything in that range, because no matter which student area you have or mixed group, you need to really be able to select text that's engaging for them. Okay? Looking at reading strategy and which one we want to use for that particular lesson. Maybe you want to incorporate some freedom for students to use whichever reading strategy if it's at the end of the year. But if it's an early part of the year and you're teaching reading or you're teaching history and you want to really focus on a specific type of reading strategy, we'll talk about some options that are available there. We want to establish seminar principles, scaffold student questions, teach the seminar skills themselves, and then in the end, we always want to save some time for debrief, where students have a chance to step back and really assess what did they gain from the conversation. The bell shouldn't be that last thing out the door. You need at least 15 minutes or so for them to regroup and debrief, maybe answer an overall question about what they learned from the discussion. Okay. So we're going to go through these steps, starting with selecting the text. We want to do that before. So the first 3 or 4 we really want to do before the seminar starts. So this isn't something that you start in one day. You might want to give it to them for homework where you're looking at the text a class period before and giving them a chance to really work with the text rather than just starting off with the text the first day and then jumping into the discussion. So these are grouped according to when you want to perform them based on the level of your students. Okay? And then during the seminar, definitely getting students to use their student questions that they may have developed previously. The first round that you do this, you want to encourage students to follow the protocol and principles involved with Socratic Seminar. And then when you're finally finished, you want to have that, after the seminar is complete, do that debrief. Okay? So these are kind of grouped together. Depends on the skill level of your students. You want to really consider how much work you want to do prior to the seminar. Okay? All right. On page 5, there's some text selection ideas and suggestions. So thinking about your own classroom setting, you might want to go through that list, and I'll give you a minute or so to browse through that list of ideas for possible selection of text, things that you might already be considering using for next school year. You can jot down some notes in the margins if you like, and I'll give you about 1 minute to look at that. What did you notice about the text selections that are there? Did anything stand out? Yes?
They're not all text.
They're not all text, exactly. Some can be visual, some can be video and audio, a picture even. So is there something in there that you could use in any class setting, subject area, based on how much time you have? Yes. And it's good to build in variety so that students aren't always, I don't know, how did you phrase it, when they see that they're about to go in a trap, like they're setting me up, you know? Maybe spring a picture on them and use that picture to spark a conversation instead of printed text, actually, all right? If you look at page 7 and 7.1 and 7.2, I have, and many of our schools now have access to Avid Weekly. I remember the years where you had to go find your articles, but now Avid Weekly is available usually through your Avid elective teacher or the coordinator, and you can have access to tons of articles that are already kind of grouped in foundational level, intermediate level, and advanced level. So you can pick a piece of text based on the level of difficulty or the subject matter. So they have like humanities, they have arts, they have compare and contrast style where you might watch a video and look at a piece of artwork. So there's lots of sources out there that you can use, don't necessarily have to be from a textbook, but we want it to be engaging. So when we select the text, consider how many options that are already there. You don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. You can really use some of the sources that you have available to you. Okay. If I can take you back to your Cornell notes in the first section, it says select text. Okay. What do we want to look for when we're selecting the text? We want something that is manageable for the student level that we're working with. So just jot down some reminders. We want a level of text that's manageable for our students. Okay. It can push them a little bit. It doesn't have to be low level. It doesn't have to be extremely high level, but something that'll present a little bit of a challenge in a discussion. Okay. So when selecting the text, it can be a short excerpt of a greater piece of work. So many of us that are English teachers, if we're teaching a play, it doesn't have to be the entire play. Right? It could be a particular scene, and we can use that to help us engage in a conversation about a topic. We should give students time to work with the text prior to the Socratic Seminar. And for me, in my classroom, it looks different for each class period. I know that my Advanced Studies ACE course, I could give it to them 15 minutes and they can work with a piece of text and be ready for a Socratic Seminar. However, my 9th graders may need a little bit more time, so I may give them the period before and they get to work independently with the text and we do one read through, and then they may come back a second time with a partner and read through again, and then a third time really working with writing questions for the text. So they see it 3 times before they're ready for Socratic Seminar. And that, for some students, gives them it empowers them. It gives them an opportunity to feel more confident about what they're saying before the Socratic Seminar. You can use a couple different ways to assess. If you give a piece of text normally in your classroom, or if you're working with something and you know that you have struggling readers, you might want to give them more time as opposed to, you know, students that devour a piece of text and can talk about the complexity of it right away. You don't need to give them 48 hours, let's say, to manipulate and work with it. Okay. What type of students do you work with typically?
English 2, regular and honors.
Regular and honors. Do you see a difference in your reading levels between your regular and honors?
I taught reading and English 2 previously. This is my first year with honors. That's why I'm trying to gain some knowledge here.
I would say you could probably give them one day in class to work with the text, at least a half a period, I'd say 30, 40 minutes, so that they're working independently and then working with a partner before they get to Socratic Seminar. That would be a safe way to make sure that they have time to work with it. Step 2 is selecting the reading strategy. We're going to use marking the text, if you're familiar with that. I just encourage students to number the paragraphs first. We're going to read through, and we can do popcorn read, you can do partner read. The strategy is really not the key part. It's really what works best with your students and the level of students that you're working with. Okay? Definitely give them time to reread the text and do a couple key things that involve marking the text, which is circling key terms, looking for names of people, places, or dates that are relevant, and underlining author's claim, arguments, or assertions. That becomes a little bit more challenging for some students. It's understanding the author's purpose. So if you take a look at page 3 in your packet, at this point, just selecting the text and reading this, using a reading strategy, this is prior to the Socratic Seminar. Okay? So on page 3, you'll see read and prepare your text before the seminar using critical reading process. So that's kind of written out for you. So we want to make sure we set a purpose for reading. We pre-read, interact with the text, which is what we're talking about right now. And number 4 is the one part that a lot of us tend to overlook, and it's extending beyond the text. Okay? So if you circle number 4, it says extend beyond the text by writing several open-ended, higher-level questions that have no single right answer and will encourage discussion. This is where we get kids to step out of the box. Normally, they read something, and what do they do when they're finished? I know what mine do. What do yours do?
I'm done.
I'm done. Okay. Drop the pencil, you know, that dramatic pencil drop, and they're like sitting back waiting. And they're waiting. And they're waiting for you to do all the work. Well, Socratic Seminar puts the work on them. And they have to decide, how do we want to have, what kind of conversation do we want to have? So extending beyond the text is key because you want them to create the questions that are going to lead the conversation ahead of time. So they're not thinking on the spot. They have a chance to process all of this. They have a chance to really think, okay, what do I want to talk about? If this is an interesting piece of text, it'll engage them with questions that they want answers to, or they at least want to find out what their peers think. Okay? So looking at number 4, asking why about the author's choice in the text. Ask about viewpoints or perspectives. And these are some suggestions. Examine the title or tone of the text. Asking if scenarios, if the author were alive today. Ask questions that explore your own interpretation of the reading. And ask about the importance. So what? Okay, he did this. So what? Like, what's the relevance of it? Okay. So these are questions, if you notice, they don't have a yes or no answer. There's no real wrong answer. They just have to elaborate on what they're presenting to the class. So the key part to all of this is, yes, we want to do this reading strategy and making sure that we're interacting with the text, but if we don't get to step 4, that extending beyond the text, our conversations are going to sound like this. And it's not much of a conversation. And we want them to have that discussion. We want them to be able to engage in that. All right? So that's page 3 in your packet, and it was number 4 if you weren't with us. So now it's a time for us to get together and select the text. So in your packet, starting at section 7, I think it's labeled 7, 7.1, and 7.2. We have a choice of 3 articles. In previous trainings, I'd always use just one particular article, but really just to have a gauge of topics that you can discuss. One is about dieting. That's on 7. 7.1 is about staying alive by smartphone. And 7.2 is about fidget toys. My son has a handful in his pocket right now. So as a class, I wouldn't necessarily give this option to my students and say, okay, let's pick an article. But we're in a setting where we can decide which one is of interest to us, and then we'll just pick that article and read it using our reading strategy. So an interest in the diet one. Anyone? Show of hands. You prefer to read the diet article? No? Any interest in smartphone article? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And fidget spinners. Seems like fidget spinners win. So let's take a look at 7.3, 7.2, thank you. Now, keeping in mind our reading strategy, do you want students to just start reading? No. What do we do first?
Number the paragraphs.
Number the paragraphs, please. And this will make for easy referencing, so that's the purpose behind numbering the paragraphs. Even if it's a single line paragraph. Now in our reading strategy, we're going to read the text and then we're going to reread. For our purposes today, we're going to read this text independently as you go through, mark the text, and then we're going to do a shoulder with a partner and talk about how to create those questions, okay? So I'll give you about 5 or 6 minutes to read independently, marking the text as you go. Establishing seminar principles and how is this different from the debate that we talked about that many of our students are accustomed to doing in other classes where they have to pick a position and pick a side and you're right and I'm wrong and or vice versa. A lot of students will mix up Socratic Seminar discussion for that debate setting, and they want to argue their point until they're blue in the face, right? So we want to establish that it's more about dialogue than it is about debate. And we just want to have an open dialogue, not necessarily negate someone's response to a question because we feel it doesn't match ours. And that's a lot of times where teachers will be apprehensive about this approach because they feel like students get too one-sided in their views and they just want to stick to that view. Really, we want to teach them it's about the dialogue that occurs, and you can, tally up how much contribution to the conversation that they bring and give them their grade based on their contributions to the conversation, how it propels it forward versus did you give a right answer, okay? So we kind of want them to step back from that, did I answer correctly type mode. How many of you foresee that as an issue in your classroom with your, let's say, last year students? Yeah. What were you experiencing, or do you think you would experience if you tried this with last year's group?
Well, I did.
Oh, you tried?
We used Socratic Seminar, but they often start debating within the Socratic Seminar anyway. There's always that 1 or 2 kids that just has to get their point in.
Yes.
And they don't know how to debate. They don't know how to do, it's a very difficult skill to have that higher level argument where you're dealing with a complex idea and it's more that, that argument with yourself, exploring all the nuances of the idea that you're looking at, but they often lead into things where they have an opinion about it that comes up in the Socratic Seminar, and then they want to be right. They don't care about anything else. They just want to be right and be wrong. It becomes an ego thing. It's hard not to let your ego get in the way during talking about complex ideas. So.
That was a challenge.
I've never been able to let go of the reins. I always have to be the facilitator because there's always one kid in there that has to be right and everybody else is stupid and wrong. Rein in that one ego every time.
Okay, let's see if we can give you some ideas to take back that will help put the reins on that one student.
Yes.
I see 2 hands. Start here.
I think a lot of times on social media they're asked their opinion. What do you think of this or that? And it's always kind of like, my idea is this or my idea is that. And there's a lot of strong opinion pieces that come out on there, and I think they just get used to that sort of format of discussion.
And never looking at perspectives from other perspectives. Okay.
I was just going to add a little bit to, I did not know this was Lucille sitting next to me, but being in social studies, it is easy to get caught in I'm right, or because some of the things that are happening now. And people do have their opinions on that, so I can see, it's social studies courses.
Okay.
Trying to, I'm right, you're wrong, kind of.
And wanting to stop at that level of a conversation. In the text sometimes that we're working with, it's already some bias there. And how do we get students to recognize the author's claim and their personal perspectives? So that may be a lesson in itself before you actually get to this discussion piece, the the facilitation of this Socratic Seminar, is getting them to understand how is the author biased, how are they biased, looking at that from perspectives. I actually teach ACE Global Perspectives for Cambridge course, and that's one of the focuses, is looking at it from multiple perspectives. So last year, for the first time, I tried assigning a perspective to my student. And there were key perspectives throughout the Socratic Seminar, and they were encouraged to share their perspective with the group. And it made them step back, and then we talked about it in the debrief. What did it feel like to only look at it from this perspective? And then it became the norm kind of in the group to think about it from multiple perspectives. When we really get them completely away from the debate piece, and we get them understanding that this is not a debate style, so I'm not really looking at what you have to say personally. I'm looking at the text, I'm considering the text and what the text is saying from different perspectives, and really just talking about the text itself. It's no longer Thomas said, or Joseph said, and I don't like and I don't agree. It's no longer that personal attack, because you're absolutely right. Our students will leave the room upset with another peer sometimes because they feel as if it's been a personal attack on them. And we don't want that feeling. We want it to be a discussion. We're having an academic discussion that you will practice in college. And adults, we have discussions all the time. We don't raise our hand. There's no, at the end of the conversation, saying, okay, let's debrief. No, the conversation's over and you move on. When we transition getting our students from this debate idea to a dialogue, it's going to start off with looking at how do we get them to develop open, guided, and closing questions. So if you can turn to page 13 in your packet. These are just some ideas on how to develop those questions appropriate to the stage in the Socratic Seminar. So our first chunk would be opening questions, second chunk guided questions to move the conversation forward, and then closing questions. We've worked with these before. They may look familiar to you. I use them in our sentence, our question stems, so that my struggling readers don't necessarily have to spend time developing a question from scratch. And it kind of saves us some time. So I give them these in the early part of the year, and then I transition them out, and by the end of the year they're developing their own questions. And if I say an opening question, they know it needs to be something that hasn't been explored, or maybe something that will move the conversation forward.